Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We can go ahead and get started. We appreciate your taking time out of your day to listen in and give us your feedback. My name is Paul Hornbeck. I'm a senior planner with the town of Windsor. We've got a great consultant team with us on this project, Carlos Hernandez with CJH Planning and Bill Fox with Fox Tuttle Transportation Group. They're really doing the bulk of the work on this project as we are really just in the early stages of kicking off, and we're looking at 7th Street and Walnut Street and the kind of existing conditions, and want to hear about your experiences in those corridors and make sure we're understanding what's really going on in the field out there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos to dive into the agenda and really kick things off.
Thanks, Paul. So thanks everybody for joining. This is the third meeting this week. We've had the same meeting. We had it Monday night, and then we had it Wednesday at noon, and now we're doing it tonight. So if you were here before and you're back, thanks for coming back. If you haven't been here before, thanks for being at this session. The first thing that's probably worth mentioning is we're recording these sessions so that people who can't attend, who have other things maybe going on this evening or one of the other times, they can go back and watch it. So we're recording this. We're going to post it on the project webpage probably early next week at the latest. So just be aware of that. If you see something in here you want to go back and see again, feel free. And so what we're trying to do in this session is introduce the project, talk about the timelines. And as you see here, we're going to do that for about 5 minutes, talk about the schedule. The second thing we're going to do is to review the existing conditions. And we have a series of really high level summary information and then some real detailed bullet points. For those of you who like the details, you'll get excited. There'll be a lot of details in there. And then we don't have to talk the whole time. So what we're actually going to do is get some responses from you via some polling questions, and then have you respond to us in the Q&A format, which I'll tell you about in a second. So we'll do that for about 25 minutes. And then after that, we're going to review the draft project goals for this project, the 7th Street project and the Walnut project. We have two different projects we're working on. We'll explain that in a little bit too. But we're going to talk about goals, and we're going to get your polling comments and feedback, and then have a question and answer session as well. And then hopefully we'll be right on time, around 55, 60 minutes, and we can review next steps. We're intending to stick around a little bit longer if folks have questions that they want to ask as this all kind of sits in over the next hour. And so we're happy to do that for a little bit afterwards. So that's generally the agenda. Just a couple of mechanics for those of you who are not super familiar with Zoom. There's a toolbar either on the top side or bottom or left of your screen. And what you'll see there is a little bubble that says Q&A, like little talk bubbles. And in that, you can use that to type in questions either to one person or to the entire group that you may have as we're going through these presentations. We're going to stop at different points in here. So we'll stop after the existing conditions presentation. We'll do some polling, which is going to be kind of fun. You're going to see the results on the fly. But as you're going through all that, if you want to ask us questions, just put them in there. We're not going to respond to them at the moment that you type them. We're going to wait till we get to the end of these sections, and then we'll respond to them. So we can do that this evening. If we get a lot of them, which I hope we do, we may not be able to get to all of them, and we'll post responses to those after these meetings. But I hope that we could have enough time to get through all of them. So as you're going through and your questions basic is like, can you go back to that slide and explain this? Or I'm not sure about this data point. Could you put that back up again or explain it more? They're great. So that's a little bit of mechanics on how to do that. So that's where we're headed this evening. So hopefully we'll keep it interesting for 54 minutes. You'll stick around, and I guess that's it. We'll get rolling. So Bill and Paul, did I miss anything on the agenda that we should cover? Okay, cool. All right, so the first thing that we want to do tonight is show you a video. And this is the video that the mayor put together for us. And I'm going to share this, and I'm going to just play it, and then we can talk about it quickly after. So Paul and Bill, I'll just need your thumbs up that this is going okay.
Hi, I'm Mayor Paul Rennemeyer, and I'm here to let you know about a new town project and how my fellow town board members and I need your input. The 7th Street Multimodal Corridor Project is a new town planning project designed to create a safer transportation network along our 7th Street for walkers, bikers, and cars. The corridor provides both regional commuters and local neighborhood access. It provides access to downtown and a number of community amenities, including 3 elementary schools, Windsor Middle School, and our very own Windsor Severance Library. This project is in direct response to community input and technical data gathered in the town's transportation master plan, and it's designed to make 7th Street safer and better for everyone. If you haven't already, please visit windsorprojectconnect.com to learn more about the project and share your experience navigating 7th Street. Your input helps us guide the process and helps the town board better represent the residents' needs and interests. Thank you for your participation, and stay tuned for more project updates.
Okay, so this website, if you haven't been to it, it's where a lot of town project website or town projects are going on right now. We have 2, this project, which is the 7th Street project, and our other project, which is the Walnut corridor project. So we have 2 projects on there. You can get to them from this URL. And this video from the mayor is actually on our 7th Street homepage. So if you wanted to watch that again or see it, pass it around, it's there as well. So that's the welcome video. And what we wanted you to see there is that this project and effort is a response to the town board and the transportation master plan, which we'll talk about in a minute here. Okay, so what is the timeline for this project? Carlos, what's going on with this? How long is it going to take? What are you doing? What are you not doing? And so we have a schedule here. This is also going to be, this is also on the website, on the corner of the website, if you navigate to it. We just launched the project in August. So we just started in August, and we're talking about goals during that session, starting to get existing conditions, starting to talk about the measures in which we'll evaluate the ideas that come up during this project. We moved into September and really started thinking about options and ideas and existing conditions for the corridor. And we're doing that tonight with you. We're talking about your experiences. We want to hear from you about what it's like out there. What do you have seen changed over time? What would you like to see changed in the future? How are things going out there? November 9th, which is a Monday, we're meeting with the town board to give them an update on the goals for this project, what we've heard from the community, and the existing conditions. From there, after November 9th, we are working all of November and all of December on ideas and options. So at this point, we don't have any options available. We haven't designed anything yet. It's premature to do that because we haven't heard from you, the community, and we haven't heard, we don't have all of the existing conditions information yet. So there have been some posts on social media about ideas that we have and solutions, and we are far from that place. We will be at that place in December. We will have another set of meetings like this in December, where any preliminary ideas we have will be previewed in this venue and format. And then we'll hear from you about what you think. And then we'll have another meeting in January where we show you the refined designs based on your input. And then in mid-January, those ideas, those design ideas will go to town board for approval. And you see in January here, it says for 30% preferred design and costs. Well, what that means is once the town board has said, these are the designs that we think should move forward, the community has hopefully been behind those decisions to move these forward, we will move into engineering and design. So we are not going to start engineering any of the projects or coming up with 100% cost estimates until we know for sure that the town board has given us a direction to move forward. And obviously, like I've said, and I'll say a few times tonight, that town board direction will be influenced and will be gathered through this process, the online process, and a couple different mediums where you can submit your comments. So we're just at the beginning. We don't have any designs yet. We're working toward that. Ideally, if the project stays on schedule, which we're going to try very hard to do, by June, we'll have the 80% engineering plans, almost final engineering plans and costs, and the town board can make decisions about implementation. So you're at the right point. We're just starting. We're gonna hear a lot from you tonight about your experiences, but know that if you want to stay involved, November 9th, 5:30, it's a Monday, that could be your next chance to hear what the town board thinks of the goals and existing conditions. And then in December, you'll have an opportunity to give us some feedback on these preliminary design ideas. So that's the schedule. The final thing that's worth noting is there's 2 projects. There's a project on 7th Street, goes from Eastman Drive, so the roundabout, up a little bit north of Main Street. So that's the 7th Street project. And then there's the Walnut Corridor project that goes from about 1st Street on the east side to about 15th on the west side. So 2 unique projects that we're doing at the same time. Bill and Paul, did I miss anything in terms of the schedule that you wanted to cover?
Just a quick note that, if town board wants to move forward with funding these projects and some construction, we could potentially be underway with some improvements next summer.
That's great. Okay. It reminded me to say one thing here. If you take a look at the November, December box, we are going to work on a basic and an enhanced design. So Bill and I have an opportunity to do these projects all around Colorado. And what we found through the years is communities tend to get really excited about the big ideas. And they also tend to be the big ideas that are really expensive, that takes decades to build. And so in the interim, things stay the same. And usually staying the same is not good because you get more crashes, you get more congestion, you get less places for people to walk and bike and circulate. So we've been pioneering this concept of starting with a basic design, one that you can afford, particularly now given COVID and everything going on, a financially responsible plan that gets you started along the way. But that financially responsible plan that gets you going, which is the basic plan, allows you to grow into the big vision and idea. So we're going to create both, and we don't have those yet. That's why we're on this webinar, many more with you, but that's the idea for the design. So with that, now you are all reasonably versed in the timeline and what's going on. A lot of that information is on the websites as well on the side, so you can go and check out that information, as well as you can replay this video if you wanted to know more. What we're going to do next for about 15, 17 minutes, if we're good, is go through the existing conditions in the corridor. And then we're going to ask you some polling questions about those existing conditions. Remember that during this existing condition presentation, if you have questions about anything you see, feel free to add them into the question and answer think bubbles up at the top. So, and Paul and Bill, I just want to make sure you can hear me okay and you can see the slides okay. They're presenting through, thumbs up. Cool. All right, so I think it's important with a corridor study like this to start with the history. And it's really interesting because this corridor has been changing for over 100 years. So there has been a lot going on. The corridor has seen tremendous change. So the photo on the lower right-hand side, and then these articles are from the Historic Society, which is, they've been really helpful helping us tell the story of what's been happening. I would basically be standing just a little bit north of Eastman Park Drive looking south on 7th Street in 1945. And that's what it looked like. And if you go even further back from there and you read the archives, if you look at these articles, it talks about when the automobile started showing up in Windsor. And you had these conditions where I presume Model Ts or some form of first vehicles were interacting in streets with horses still, and a lot of crashes. And a lot of uncertainty about how all these people were going to share these spaces. And so I've seen some posts recently on some of the social media channels about how Windsor has changed so much and how traffic has grown. And I could only think about these photos and what people 100 years ago or even 50 years ago would have thought about what it looks like today. And so tremendous amount of change over time. If you fast forward from the 40s and start moving into the 50s, you start to see interesting things happen with the arrival of CDOT. So in 1953, CDOT designated Main Street, and so we know it as Colorado 257, but Main Street came to town with CDOT. And in 53, they did that. And about 9 years after that, because it became a state route and more traffic came through, they installed the first traffic signal. And so that was at 7th and Main in 1962. And if you go back and read the articles about that, there was a lot of debate about whether that traffic signal would make sense in terms of being safe for the community, whether it was an investment that was going to lead to the destruction of the community. Some people thought about how Denver was coming up here and how it was going to change. So a lot of history in this corridor about unsettling change and things evolving from transportation. If you fast forward further into the 60s, you start to see 7th Street particularly come to what we call a more complete street. So you see things like sidewalks being suggested, curb and gutter, so that when you get these big floods from the fields, water can be diverted away and not flood most of what you know is Old Town right now. And so these study like this went on over 50 years ago now, 40, so I guess it's 60 years ago now, that debated what you should do in the corridor. And a lot of conversation with town board went on. It took them about 2 years to decide to make some changes in the corridor. And that happened in the 60s. From the 60s up until about the mid 90s, you see a lot of those visions being implemented. So 1995, some new paving going on down south, and a lot of maintenance and construction occurs. So that was a quick summary of the last 100 years of a lot of change and a lot of things feeling, moving and evolving in a way that there was a lot of debate about. And so I presume moving forward with this project, there'll be that similar kind of conversation that happens, and it's normal. It's not the first time that's happened in this corridor. Our anchor for what we're doing moving forward is the Transportation Master Plan. I'm not sure if anybody or if this webinar had participated in that, but it was over the last year that it was prepared. It was actually adopted right before COVID really got going. It was adopted in March of this year. And it will guide the next 20 years of transportation investment in the town. And so a couple graphics on that so you know about this. And FYI, a Transportation Master Plan is on our website. You can get to it, you can download it, it's PDF, reasonably easy to read. In that Transportation Master Plan, the most important thing that was recommended as a priority was safety. Regardless of any mode of travel, the number one goal is that everybody gets home, everybody gets to work, everybody gets to school, everybody gets to the donut shop in a way that is safe and allows them to enjoy this community. So that is a fundamental goal that we are going to pivot from. There are two other things that showed up in the Transportation Master Plan that are worth noting. It's worth noting that our area, the 7th and Main area, 7th and Walnut areas were noted as pedestrian priority zones, right? So here's 7th in here, and then in Walnut corridor is kind of living in there. So we don't have too many missing sidewalks in our zone, but it was designated in the Transportation Master Plan as a pedestrian priority area. The other thing that was noted in the Transportation Master Plan are new bike lanes. So it was recommended bike lanes on 7th. And then also that the Walnut Street corridor have new bike lanes, and then possibly these things called bike boulevards along Walnut. In addition to the fact that maybe this connection up to Main and then some form of bike connection could be happening near Main. So the Transportation Master Plan was a little bit clearer in terms of these corridors of designs that they wanted to see move forward. So that's the Transportation Master Plan. Why is that important? Well, Main Street's the key to life in Windsor. A lot of things that happen in Windsor happen along Main Street. And so donuts and food and schools and great burgers and paint and coffee and haircuts, everything that we love to do lives along Main Street. In addition to that, a lot of the population lives in this zone that's rather, from a, I guess as a crow would fly, walkable and bikeable to these spaces. So that doesn't mean everybody's gonna do that. Doesn't mean you have to do it for every trip. But man, there is a lot of Windsor's population, a good third of it, that lives in a really short distance to all these things going on. And so the Transportation Master Plan said 7th Street and Walnut Street should be connecting to these areas. In addition to that, if you've participated in a recently adopted plan, which was the Open Space and Trails Master Plan, if you look off to the left here, two of the top priorities, really 4 of them, access to the river walks and natural areas, being able to ride your bike, being able to walk and get out in nature. And this was before COVID, so even more so now with COVID, people want to be out. And you see here that you have these 2 great regional trail connections, and you have these great spaces, these great public spaces to be in, but you somehow have to get there from these neighborhoods. So if you look at, once again, like a third of Windsor's population and where they live and reside, and then the preferences not only from the Transportation Master Plan, but from the Trails and Parks Master Plan, people are saying, we want to be connected. We want to get to these spaces. So 7th Street and Walnut Street are absolutely critical to make better connections along, to make them safer, to ensure that everybody has a space and is paying attention to one another while they're out there. So here are the high level points, and then I'm going to pass it over to Bill, and he's going to jump into details. So if you love the bullet points and want to stay at the high level, these next 2 are for you. If you love all the details and you want to see all the numbers, Bill is going to make your evening because he's going to show you all those good facts. So what about 7th Street? Well, on the high level, 7th Street is posted 30 miles an hour. We're going to show you how fast or how naughty or good people are with that in a minute, but it's posted 30. There's no protected place to ride in the corridor. So if you wanted to ride north, south, Eastman Park up to get a donut or get that paintbrush for that project you're doing, or just go to a music concert, no place to ride in that corridor. The sidewalks are there, but there's no buffer. Paul and I were out putting those signs in the ground that you may have seen on 7th Street. And when you're standing out there, the sidewalk's right next to the travel lanes in some cases. It's near parking in some places, but some of the parking is not as utilized. So you're really feeling a lot of the vehicles as they move by. If you want to walk and cross the street, sometimes you have to walk a couple blocks in either direction to make that crossing because the crosswalks are infrequent. There are a lot of crashes in this corridor relative to Windsor. Bill's going to talk about that, so just be aware of that. We talked about the connections to open space in downtown. The mayor talked about that in the video. 7th Street's the lifeblood. It's been that way for 100 years, right, that we learned about tonight. And more importantly, we think that this is a corridor that has a lot of different unique neighborhoods along there that should be celebrated. And then lastly, for my part, Walnut. So why Walnut? Well, we talked about how Main Street has all of these destinations and everything going on, but it turns out that Walnut has some faster posted speed limits, and it also has a wider street, and it has a lot of places to turn over it. So it's really not an ideal place for making a long walk bike trip. You can do it. There's sidewalks, there's intersections where you can cross at, but through the transportation master plan and the community involvement, it was identified that Walnut would be a parallel street that may be a little more conducive, a little more slower moving, a little more enjoyable, potentially feeling a little bit safer. And so let's enhance that corridor so people can travel east-west instead of trying to fit everything on Main Street. So that's why Walnut corridor is being studied and talked about as a corridor study. So those are the high-level points. I'm going to turn it over to Bill to get into the details.
Thanks, Carlos. I want to talk about what we know so far about transportation in both of these corridors. And I want to focus on 4 or 5 key topics in the process. Those topics are crashes and safety. I want to talk about automobile traffic volume along both of these roadways. I want to talk about the speed of that traffic going through these corridors. Carlos will talk a little bit about bike and pedestrian traffic, and then I'm going to wrap up by talking about what we know about parking in these corridors. So first, crashes. Here we are on 7th Street. We looked at a 5-year history of crashes in both of these corridors. We got a very extensive database from the police department. We looked at all 107 crashes on 7th Street. We know where they were, we know what type they were, we know how they occurred. This is just a very quick summary, but you can see that over half of those crashes occurred at Main Street, and most of the injuries occurred at Main Street, that congested intersection. The second highest intersection was at Walnut, just 1 block south. And should be no surprise, that's where most of the traffic and the congestion is in this corridor along 7th Street. We also saw 14 crashes down at the south end at Eastman Park, but it's interesting that the Eastman Park and the Stone Mountain crashes that we saw didn't have any injuries noted. We also focused on bicycle and pedestrian crashes in the corridor, looking for patterns that we could, on all of these crashes, we're going to be looking for corrective measures as we think about safety in the corridor. But we didn't see any concentrations of bicycle and pedestrian crashes. They kind of were spread throughout the intersections in the corridor. On the next slide, we'll look at Walnut. Walnut only had 41 crashes in those 5 years, so quite a bit fewer, and they were spread out quite a bit more. We saw 8 crashes at 11th Street. That was probably the high intersection, and then 5 and 4 and at various intersections throughout the rest of the corridor. And again, we know what types of crashes these were, so we're going to be looking at how we might mitigate those as we look at alternatives. 2 of the crashes involved bicycles in this corridor, and one interesting thing was 13 of the crashes involved parking and parking maneuvers and parked vehicles. And that's maybe not a surprise given some of the angle parking and the demand for parking that occurs, particularly east of 7th along Walnut. So how about traffic? We're going to talk about daily traffic and then a little bit about peak traffic. peak hour traffic. But over the course of the day on 7th Street, there's somewhere between, say, 8,000 and 12,000 vehicles a day. That, depending on your perspective, it's either a big number or a little number, but when you think about what's the capacity of this roadway to carry traffic, it's probably somewhere between 15 and 20,000 vehicles a day. So we're not near capacity, and it's important to note that this roadway is not going to need to be widened for additional automobile lanes in the future. Okay, next one, Carlos. So when we think about peak hour traffic in the 7th Street corridor, the biggest congested intersection obviously is at Main Street. And we know that the worst congestion at Main Street is for traffic that's approaching and trying to turn left. For example, Carlos is sketching the northbound to westbound left turn where we have 350 vehicles turning left in the PM peak hour. These numbers are AM, then noon, then PM in each of these sets of numbers. And we measure traffic delay or traffic operations using a concept called level of service. We give it a letter grade like a report card, A through F. The overall intersection has a level of service C, which is pretty good, but we know that the northbound left turns is in the E range, so very congested trying to turn left. So that's at Main and 7th. Now, if we go look at Walnut Street and daily traffic, quite a bit lower from 2,000 to 3,500 vehicles a day. Now, this one probably doesn't have as much capacity along Walnut, but it could still carry about 10,000 vehicles a day. So again, we're nowhere near the roadway's capacity, and we don't anticipate any alternatives that would widen the road for the automobile. One thing we do know about the traffic on Walnut, however, though, is the east-west traffic is probably influenced by what's going on at 7th and Main. Because this graphic here shows you, for example, that in the morning peak hour, and this is AM and PM in this graphic, there's 104 people that want to turn left northbound to go west on Walnut. Why are they doing that? They probably don't want to go to a house in the neighborhood. They're trying to get through and probably get out to the State Highway on Main Street. And the congestion up one block north at Main Street is causing them to want to divert through the neighborhood. These folks are probably going over to 9th, where there's another signal that'll get you up to Main Street. And we know that if the east-west traffic on Walnut Street at 7th is very difficult to go east-west because there's no traffic signal there. And so it's hard to get across. You can see the numbers that only less than 30 vehicles an hour try to cross the street there. And that's because it's difficult to do that. And again, the people are diverting onto Walnut, but not crossing on Walnut at this intersection. Next one, Carlos. Okay, so in this kind of summarizes what I've been saying about these northbound left turns. You can see at Walnut that 104 vehicles I just talked about, and up at Main that 339 vehicles. These are in the AM peak hour. And then down at Stone Mountain, you can see 200 vehicles northbound turning left onto Stone Mountain in the morning. And what are they doing? They're all going, the Stone Mountain folks are probably going over to 11th to get up to the traffic signal at Main Street or get to the school or whatever. But they're diverting off of 7th because it's easier to go on an alternative route. So we see those diversions happening. As far as the speed in these corridors, we measured the speed over a 24-hour period on each of the corridors in a number of locations. And what we saw here on 7th is that south of Main Street, the speed limit is 30, and yet the 85th percentile speed that we measure, which is simply the speed that 15% of the folks are going faster than that speed. The 85th percentile speed tends to be 6 miles an hour over the speed limit. And that's an indication to us as traffic engineers that you probably want to think about ways to mitigate speed in that corridor. North of Main Street on 7th, there's a different condition. The speed limit actually is 45, and people actually were driving less than the speed limit, which indicates that they didn't feel like it was a corridor where they should be or needed to be traveling at 45 miles an hour. Then on Walnut, similar, 25 miles an hour on the west end of the corridor is the posted speed limit, 30 miles an hour is the speed limit east of 7th. The west end, we saw that 85th percentile speed as 6 miles an hour over the speed limit, 31 miles an hour. And on the east end, we saw the 85th percentile speeds only 4 miles an hour over the speed limit, but it's 30 to 35 miles an hour in a corridor that we want to think about as a comfortable pedestrian and bicycle corridor. So speed is an issue as we think about the designs going forward.
And then just from a bike and pedestrian standpoint, we don't have a lot of detailed numbers for the corridor. We were intending to get those mid-COVID happen, and we don't have detailed information at each intersection. We know anecdotally, and then also from being out there, that there are a lot of people walking and bicycling in the corridor. One data set that we do have, which is really interesting, is Strava. It's an app that people use when they go run and ride bicycles. And if you look at this, it's kind of interesting to see, like we were talking about earlier, this notion people want to use this corridor, connect to open spaces and green spaces. So I'll draw here. Here's our 7th Street corridor we're working on. That's this one right here. And then look at this one. There's Walnut. So when the colors are darker, that means there's more use. And as they get a little bit lighter, it means there's use, but not as much. And so I'm going to erase this as you can see this again. But what it's showing us is that that people who use this app, who choose to opt in and do it, they are definitely using the regional greenways, but they're using 7th Street and they're using Walnut to make these connections. You can also see 11th in here as well as another connection. So we're really, these corridors are missing part of the bicycling. This is 11th, the bicycling network, so to speak, that's not present. So that's really important background data in terms of what we're doing. So we have one more piece, which is the parking data, and then we're going to ask you some polling questions. So don't forget to fill in the Q&A if you have questions on any of this as we're going through it. Bill, I'm going to erase this and let you keep going on your last slides.
Sure. So one of the key considerations is how are these corridors utilized from a parking perspective? Where is the parking available, and then how well is it utilized? And most of these corridors are residential areas, so the way you monitor how much parking demand there is you go out at 5 in the morning when everybody's sleeping. They're home and they're sleeping and their cars are parked. So we did that along both corridors. And for the most part, we found out, particularly say here along 7th, that there's very little on-street parking, 0 to 2 vehicles per block in most of the blocks, with one key exception, and that's here at between Chestnut and Stone Mountain, where we have some high density multifamily housing on both sides of 7th Street. And in that block, we saw quite a bit of parking on street, whether it was the most efficient parking to get to their front door, or the parking lots weren't big enough at in the apartment complexes, we don't know, but it was well used in that zone. Now, so we just need to know this as we think about alternatives and we look to the future. On Walnut, the last slide I have is we looked at parking all along the corridor again, and here we saw very little parking in that 5 a.m. hour when people were home. Very little parking, 0 to 4 vehicles per block, where you could have 10 to 12 vehicles per block. We did notice that and we know that the angled parking, particularly east of 7th, in the vicinity of churches, it was not that well utilized at nighttime, but it was very utilized during the day, and particularly on weekends when church services are in ongoing. So when we think about any alternatives in the future that might change the character of the roadway, having an understanding of parking supply and demand is critical.
That's great. So Paul, about the existing conditions that we presented, did we miss anything that you wanted to add in before we asked about some polling questions?
I think you guys covered it very well.
Okay. All right. So we're going to use some polling questions. They're going to pop up in a second here. I'm going to ask you 4. And then once again, if you have questions you'd like to ask, you can use the Q&A tool if you'd like to ask questions. So I'm going to launch the first one. And I'm just going to go back here to a slide so that you can see the high level points. So just give me a second. I'm just going to rewind back. There we go. I'm going to ask you about Walnut first. So get ready. Okay, I'm going to launch the poll. So the first question for you for Walnut is, when you heard Bill and I talk about the Walnut Street existing conditions data, does it match your experience when you're out there walking, riding, driving, doing whatever you're doing out there, does it? So first one is yes, a lot of it reflects my experience. Second one, yes, some of it matches my experience. Third one, no, none of this matches my experience since you're all on Jupiter. And then the last one's, I'm not sure yet. I probably need some more time. So I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds to think through that, process that. And then I'm going to hit end the poll, and then you can all see the results. So we have 9 of 14 people who've contributed to the poll at this point. So I can give you another 15 seconds. Great, thank you, everybody. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So sounds like yes and not everything yes, but pretty close to everything yes. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to ask you the next question. The next one is, so do you agree with the existing conditions data? So this is important because when we go forward with town board, we all have to have a similar set of data points to use to make decisions, right? And so the question is, do you agree with this data? Is this data that we should use moving forward in the process? Yes, I agree with it. Maybe I agree with some of it. No, I don't agree with any of it, and you're not sure yet. And then those of you who maybe say either yes, no, or maybe, if you could give us some indication in the Q&A of maybe something you say, maybe, but there's something I don't know yet, or I'm not agreeing with, let us know in the Q&A so that we can follow up. If you're not comfortable doing that in the Q&A, no problem. There's a lot of different ways you can communicate with us that we'll tell you about moving forward. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll. I'm gonna share the results. Okay, great. So Paul and Bill, by the way, you can see these results, right? Okay, good. So looks like the number one here is maybe. I agree with some of it. So once again, if the parts that you don't agree with, can you let us know those so that we can be thinking through that data and what it means? All right, so that was Walnut. So let me go here back to this other one. We're gonna do 7th now. So I'm gonna ask you the same 2 questions, but I'm gonna ask you about 7th. All right, so I'm gonna launch the poll. So remember this first one, does the 7th Street existing conditions data match your experience? This is what you experience along in your travels. Yes, a lot of it. Yes, some of it. No, not any of it. Now you're on Mars, or not sure. Okay, I'm gonna give you another 10 seconds or so here. And Bill and Paul, maybe you could watch the Q&As as they come in, and we'll respond to those after on the next question. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll. Share the results. All right, so this is reflecting a lot of your experience. Some of you said matches some. So once again, if you could tell us in the 7th Street corridor what may not be matching your experience or what we might be missing, that would be really helpful. Okay, final question, and then we respond to some of your Q&A questions. So you've seen this one before. So the last one here, I'll launch it. 7th Street data, do you agree with it? Is this the data set that we should be using moving forward as we begin to think about designs for the corridor, as we begin to think about which ways to invest in the corridor? Is this the data set? Okay, I'm gonna give you another 10 seconds because you're all pros at this now, so thanks. And thanks for being here again. Really appreciate it. Looks like we're tracking pretty good with time. Can I end the poll? I'm gonna share it. Okay, all right, good. So yes and maybe are still trending, which is great. So no one on this group at least thought that we were crazy with the data, and everybody seems to be absorbing it, so that's good to hear. So Q&A. So Bill and Paul, can you go through Q&A for a minute here?
I've been looking, Carlos, can you still hear me? Yes? And on Q&A, I see someone has indicated worse 3 times.
Okay.
And I'm asking, does worse mean that the conditions are worse than we've described? Is that what the word worse means?
Well, there's another comment that came in and said, are you saying that you're putting bike paths will be put on Walnut? And so I think what this person is trying to say is these things are going to be worse if you do them. And I think they're saying that things may be worse than we're forecasting out there. That's my hunch, is that things are worse than we're actually showing. And so,
Yeah, I think I just see a yes. So that maybe in response to my question, yes, the opinion is that things are worse than we've described
yeah.
in terms of traffic. And then there's another one that says, are you saying that the bike paths will be put on Walnut?
Right. So the transportation master plan, I'll go back to that slide for a second. The transportation master plan suggested that Walnut Street, there's bike lanes on Walnut Street. Too many windows open here. So there's existing bike lanes on Walnut Street. They end around 5th Street or so. And so the transportation master plan said, I'm going to draw this so everybody can see, erase pen. So those bike lanes end today. And then the transportation master plan said, hey, what if you extend those starting to move west? And then once you get, I think this is probably around 9th, once you get west of 9th, what if you went up to Main, or what if you kept going on Walnut? So transportation master plan left that to be determined, but said that those are thought to be what's recommended there. And this process that we're going through is trying to figure out what the design is actually going to be. So that's where we are. So we're not saying anything yet. We're just showing you what the previous plans have said and trying to get a handle on what's going on out there.
Right. So Carlos, a couple of new comments. We have concerns about diverting more traffic through Walnut residential areas. So that's certainly a concern, and we hear you. Another one was, are you considering affecting parking on Walnut? I do not have a driveway and need to park there, plus the churches need it, and so do the residents at the apartments between 5th and 6th. And then I'll read one last one that I see. I live on Walnut Street and see high traffic at times due to Main Street congestion. Are there any plans to reduce truck traffic on Main?
Okay, so these are great. We can turn those into, that's an issue you have. We don't have any plans yet. So we are literally just at the beginning. We're hearing what your experience is. So if I was gonna, and I hope I don't speak for you, so let me know in the chat if this makes sense. But I think I would turn those into, I live along Walnut Street. I see high traffic during times. I'd like to see truck traffic reduced on Main. I'm going to make an assumption there that would happen. And then on the next one that came in, I'm concerned about traffic on Walnut Street will increase. So that's a good one. So, okay, I'm concerned that your designs will increase traffic. And I presume when you say traffic, you mean motor vehicle traffic. But can you clarify if you mean I'm concerned that more people walk or bike on the street, which I don't think is the case, but I just want to clarify when you say I'm concerned more traffic, I presume that means more people driving car traffic. And Bill, there's another one down at the bottom, a couple new ones.
Yep, and there's, let's see, I lost it now.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cindy, for clarifying that. And then, so Paul, the next one is, are there plans to put can you speak to the one about the grocery store anchor and traffic?
Sure. Are there any plans to anchor a grocery store on the east side of town? It appears the increased traffic on Walnut going west on Walnut off 11th Street is because everyone is using Walnut as a thoroughfare to get to the grocery store. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, Carlos, but certainly.
I actually want Paul to respond to that one as town planner. Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the grocery store, it would be great if we could get a grocery store on the east side of town and kind of southwest part of town, you know, to make those more convenient to folks. It's really more the private market business opportunities that they kind of need a certain number of rooftops to open. So those probably don't have those rooftops quite yet, but you know, hopefully those are something that could be coming soon.
Okay, and so then the concern there is what happens to Walnut? Is there going to be more traffic on Walnut, right? And so I think we can say over the last 3 meetings that we've had, that's been a universal concern about, hey, if you're going to make changes on Walnut, can you also make sure that if there's traffic there that they're obeying the speed limit? Remember, Bill showed you they're driving over the speed limit currently, and that if you do things, that we try to manage how much traffic is on Walnut compared to the main thoroughfares, Main and 7th in this case. So we hear that. Churches really need, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Carlos.
No, go ahead, Bill, please.
Well, we see the comment that churches really need parking on Walnut, and we certainly agree with you. We've heard loud and clear through the other public meetings about that same topic, and we've been in contact with some of the folks representing churches in both corridors. And then there's another one that talks about on Walnut east of 6th, the time to look at parking is not at 5 a.m. There are many churches and houses have no off-street parking. So I hear you. We did do the parking at 5 a.m. to try to quantify those folks that are parking on street and live there. But we understand that that's not the only time that parking is a concern.
Yeah, in fact, on Wednesday, we had one of the churches represented, and we've sent emails to all of the churches in the corridor, both corridors, for their input and feedback, and parking has been at the top of their list. So we understand that, and we're going to make sure that that is considered with the designs. Someone asked me to put the Walnut Street, specifically the slide back up. If this is not it, let me know and I will find the other one, but I think this is it. And we can do another minute of question and answers if anybody has any other question and answers. And then we have one more exercise to go through, keep everybody on track for the hour timeline. And then Bill and Paul, can you just scroll back through the questions, make sure we didn't leave anybody behind in the questions?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So we can obviously go back to this, no problem. If you think of other things as we move ahead, I think in the interest of everybody's time, I'm just going to fast forward to the goals section of this so that everybody has a chance to weigh in on that before we hit our hour mark. All right, so we are going to talk about goals for a few minutes here. So the idea here is that we set project goals in the beginning before we start designing and doing anything so that we know how to evaluate the project and keep everything moving forward. So what are goals? Why are we doing this? So, well, first of all, goals are really high level aspirations, right? So these are things that one day we want to achieve. They represent long-term ideas. I know it's really hard in the world that we live in because everything's pretty quick and on demand, but as planners and people who are thinking about the future, we need to make sure that these are long-term things as well. Like if you remember those pictures from the beginning, from 100 years ago and 40 years ago, that time continues to move on and things change. And as planners, although sometimes it's really unpopular, it's really critical for us to be thinking about the future. And so these are long-term ideas, and they hopefully are going to aspire to the things that are in the Transportation Master Plan. And so what we've done is drafted a series of goal statements for the 7th Street corridor and the Walnut corridor, because you just all learned that they're kind of different corridors, right? And they have different ideas that have been thought about previously. So I'm going to show you both. I'm going to talk about them for about a minute each, and then I'm going to ask you some polling questions on them. So the first one are the 7th Street goals. So the first goal that has been outlined is to create a safe and efficient corridor that is friendly to all modes of travel. Okay, so the idea here is that it's safe and efficient for everybody to move along it. So whether you're walking with a grandparent or your child, whether you're on a scooter with your kid and one of those push scooters, right? Whether you're skateboarding, whether you're walking, maybe you're bike riding, maybe you're a veteran bike rider, or maybe you're just trying it out, an e-bike for the first time, maybe you're riding with your grandkids. You're driving, you're a new driver, so you're just getting used to driving. You've been driving for 40 years and you're a pro. The idea is that we're making it safe and efficient for everybody. The second goal is to make fiscally responsible investments that serve all travelers. If you remember from the beginning, we said we're going to do a basic and an enhanced option. And that basic option is really about understanding the financial context that we're in and then balancing that with the needs that we have right now. So we are hopefully going to be able to do that and make that investment not just to benefit one type of travel mode, but all. And so that's the second goal. Third goal And someone said in a prior meeting this week, which I thought was interesting, that this one sounds a lot like the first one. So I'll be curious to know if you all think this. But this one was provide a space for everybody moving in the corridor. So the idea is, if you look at this photo today here, there's a lot of space here for people who are driving, right? So most of this space from curb to curb is for people driving. And then there's a little space over here for people to share walking and biking, scooting, or wheelchairing, and then a little space over here. And so the idea here is that there's a space for everybody who wants to travel, and then it includes intersections as well. So that's what that goal is about. The next one is about introducing some natural landscape into the corridor. And so this one is probably the better example of kind of natural landscape being in the corridor. Let me just erase this. You know, you have a lot of trees, you have some side lawns for grass. The natural landscaping not only softens the noise in the corridor, it absorbs some of the sun that's there, providing some shade. It actually absorbs some of the carbon coming out of the cars, believe it or not. And so this is a place where landscaping really helps soften the environment. As you go further south, it gets kind of harsh in terms of a lot of concrete there. And particularly when it rains a lot, if you've been down there when it really get those spring storms or those these monsoons that happen in August, you get these big flows of water, and then because it's so hardscape. So introducing some of that back in the corridor is a goal. Fifth goal is to create an identity for each neighborhood. There are unique neighborhoods along this, and you wouldn't know that because there's no signage, there's no change in how the street really reflects those neighborhoods along it. Some communities, Loveland would be one, where they're taking some of these long corridors and telling stories of the past. So using signage, memorials, they're talking about people who were war heroes, people who were pioneers in the community, and using it as a way to kind of enhance what the corridor means for everybody traveling along it. And then finally, this one is a planner one. We think it's important, but we're obviously open to all these comments. All of this is going to town board as goals in November. But the idea is to prepare for the road ahead with smart mobility. So if you remember those articles from 100 years ago, you had articles written about Model T sharing the road with horses and this interaction of technology. And the same holds true for the world that we're all going to live in the next 20, 30, 40 years, that our roads are going to be shared with a lot of different technologies. So if we're making investments in this corridor, thinking ahead 20, 30 years, so that turns out to be smart, fiscally smart now, like buying something now that could cost 5 times more in the future if we delay it is actually a smart planning and investment. So trying to think about the future of smart mobility. So that's 7th. And I'm going to rewind back to those before I ask you questions. And then next one is Walnut. These may be a little bit easier because we know Walnut already has been designated as a bikeway. So Walnut is already ahead because of the Transportation Master Plan saying there should be a bikeway here, make the connections. Whereas 7th Street, we're not totally sure yet what it's going to be. So first goal is to build a safe east-west bicycle connection that parallels and connects to Main, right? Because remember that thing about Main where there's a lot of turn movements, higher speed vehicles, more travel lanes. And so it's not that we want to avoid Main because that's where everything is, but we want to provide this parallel connection so you can go east-west in Windsor. Second goal is to reduce intersection crash potential. So we heard from people in prior meetings and on the project webpage about some of these intersections being hard to navigate through on a bicycle and people yielding and behaving. And so we want to try to reduce crash potential. And those crashes, a lot of them, like Bill said, happen at the intersection. So we want to work on that. And then finally, we not only want to introduce safety features, but we want to introduce safety features that also enhance the neighborhood. This Walnut project will fail if we enhance features that are not compatible with the neighborhood or don't add character to the neighborhood. And so that's why we need the neighborhood's input. Like we need the neighborhood to say, these are things that we think will be of benefit. Now, we've been doing this long enough to know that not everybody's gonna agree with that. There's gonna be some folks who say, I know this is good for you, but it's not good for me. And then the question as humanity or as residents is if we all agree there's some middle ground, right? And so, but the hope is that these things enhance the character of the neighborhood. So those are your project goals. Bill and Paul, did I miss anything on the project goals before I ask some polling questions about them?
I don't think so.
Okay, well with that, I'm gonna launch the poll. So just a time check. We have about 5 minutes left in the polling, and then we'll just do a real quick next steps. And then those of you who have been asking some additional questions and wanna hang out, we can hang out for a little bit longer, but I wanna be respectful of those who had an hour to give us. So just another 4 or 5 minutes with that. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay, I'm gonna launch the questions related to Walnut first. So, oh, I asked you the wrong one. Wait, don't do that one yet. Hold on, I gotta ask you the right one, sorry. Okay, I'm launching it now. All right, so the first question is, do you agree with the Walnut Corridor Bikeway project goals as written? Yes, I agree with them. Maybe I agree with some of them. No, I don't agree with any of these. Or I'm not sure yet. I need some more time for this to sit in. I don't know yet. So I'm gonna ask you one more question on these. Cool. I'm gonna end the poll. I'm gonna share the results. Bill and Paul, you seeing these?
Yep.
Great. All right, so yes, I agree with them. Maybe I agree with some of them, and someone's saying not sure yet. Once again, if you have responses to these things you'd like to see changed, wording or things out or included, let me know in the Q&A. One more question on these. I'm gonna ask you to pick the top one. So get ready, this is kind of a fun one to do. So I'm gonna give you the one right now for Walnut. I'll relaunch this one. All right, and if you polled before I cleared it, so poll again. So which one of these should be the top goal? So if you were gonna pick one and you thought that this one should be the one that should carry the day for the design and with town board decision-making, which one should it be? So, and they're the same that are on the screen.
But they're not in the same order, Carlos. So just to be sure.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So I'm gonna give you an extra minute here to review these so you make sure you get the right one. Okay, I'm gonna close this and poll, share the results. Bill and Paul seeing them?
Yep.
Oh, wow, okay. We haven't had a real balanced one yet. This is the first, this is great. So this is a little more balance in terms of what people think about the goals. Great. Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you about 7th. So let me stop sharing that. Okay, so you've seen this line of questioning before. Do you agree with the 7th Street Transportation Study goals as written? Yes, I agree with them. Maybe, I agree with some of them. Nope, no way, you're off in left field. And then the other one's not sure. Awesome. And then, so on either side or in the middle, right? Wherever you are, if you have something that you don't agree with, you want to change, we're going to be talking about that in a minute. But that's the Q&A is a way to let us know those. All right, I'm going to end poll. I'm going to share them. Paul and Bill, you seeing them?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, great. So if the brave soul who doesn't agree with any of them, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you do to change them. More importantly, like what goal you think we could write that would make it better for what your interests are. Okay, and then finally, last one, I'm going to ask you to pick the top one. So these are all the same goals.
In the same order.
They're in the same order, right?
Yep.
Cool. What reminded me, and I apologize, is I should actually add one here that says, I don't like any of these. So when we do this again next time, I will make sure to add none of the above. So I apologize. If you could let us know in the Q&A if that's your opinion, which is great. We need every opinion. Then let us just know in the Q&A. We got about 10 or 15 wait in here, so I'm going to give you another 10 or 15 seconds on this one. Just picking one. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Did everybody get in? Great. All right, sharing the results. Okay, so this one's interesting. This one's consistent with what we've seen over the last couple of meetings, which is really interesting. So we are going to get to Q&A in a minute. What I'd like Paul to do is maybe just get a quick a quick overview of the next steps so that those who want to jump off can jump off, and those who want to stay on will go through the rest of the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we continue to move through this project, there will be more opportunities for your input, and we absolutely want as much input from the community so these projects can be successful. November 9th at 5:30, there's a town board work session that will be broadcast on the Windsor TV station, or you can stream it online to follow the latest on the project there. We will also have another series of meetings similar to this one for more community input the week of December 6th. And so we'd encourage you to follow the project websites. Those are windsorprojectconnect.com. You can also watch for updates on Facebook or the town website, other social media outlets. And lastly, we just hope you spread the word to friends and neighbors on these projects to really get everyone involved to make sure we have projects that work for everyone. So that's where we're going with this.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So those of you who have to jump off, hopefully I'm better than the airlines. They made it in 2 minutes. Thanks for being here. Those of you who want to hang out, we definitely have some more questions to get through here. And we can do this for about another 10, 15 minutes. And if there are more coming in, then we'll reassess at that point. So let's do another 15 minutes. So Bill, I'll start with this first one, Bryce Reeves, 759. How many participants are there in the meeting? As at the peak of this meeting, there were 20, not including the 3 of us. So that's the answer to this one.
And Carlos, maybe just to add, this has been the 3rd meeting, probably around, I believe, 60, 65 total.
Correct. Thank you. Yes.
And then I don't know if we hit the comment on the post office parking.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely a good one there, but also worth mentioning the post office may be relocating, leasing a space that's bigger to help fit their needs better.
But even if they were to stay, staff made us well aware of the fact that the access, not just the parking, but the circulation needs of the post office need to be considered and acknowledged as part of this process on the Walnut Street.
Great. Another comment about, I feel goal 5 should be more of a bonus than a goal. Okay. Number 5. Yeah, thank you for that one. That came up on Monday night as well. So that's the 2nd time that we've heard that this week. So that's really good. Thank you. And then the last one here says, as I see it at this time, no goals addressed needs of the residents on these corridors and what effects they will have on property values. Good point. So let me think about that. So let's go to the Walnut ones. So we say neighborhood character, but we don't specifically say property values. So yes, you're correct. We don't say they should maintain property values as a goal. But if I'm picking up there that we should not have any change to property values or negatively impact property values with these investments, and address the needs of residents on these corridors. So some of the residents who have weighed in, have participated. The last couple nights, we've had people who live on Walnut. We've had people call in to town hall and also provide comment on the project website who live in the corridors. So people have told us some of that. I would not say at this point that we've heard from everybody, nor would I say we know all the needs. So I think you're accurate in calling out the fact that we were just in the beginning of this, but I just wanted to note there that we have heard from some, and I would put that in maybe like the 5 to maybe 20 of the 60 people who have participated in this process have lived along the corridor directly. We don't have everybody's addresses. We just know that from the comments that they've told us. So it could be higher, but we're hoping that you could spread the word and Doug, let people know what's going on. We'd appreciate that.
So Carlos, there was one other Any chance the speed limit can be reduced on Walnut between 11th and 15th from 25 to 20, since folks are already speeding? And I would just add to that that changing speed limits, particularly from 20 to 20, 25 to 20, is will have to be a part of a bigger conversation with the city, and kind of a citywide issue, and how the city wants to, or the town wants to proceed relative to changes to speed limits.
Right.
But certainly it's something that could be discussed and considered.
Yeah, we know from other places we're working now that just changing the speed limit in absence of doing design and enforcement and education, you tend to not get as much compliance as you would hope, right? Like if you look at the corridor today, we have it posted at 30 and people are driving 36. Well, then obviously, hopefully we posted at 20, then hopefully people would be driving 20, but we know that they may be driving 25 or 26. And so that's where we need to have not just design, but a lot of other factors moving that ahead, right, Bill?
Yep.
Okay. I see another one has turning left on the 7th Street been addressed? Let's go back to that slide. So Cindy, yes, it has. Let's go back to the Bill, your magic slide here. All of the data, maybe you just run through that one more time. I'll get you queued up and I'll erase it.
Well, this is one of the slides that talks about turning left, and as we mentioned, and the question was turning left onto 7th been addressed, onto 7th as opposed to off of 7th.
So maybe this one?
That's maybe a different question. And
No.
if the question was specifically how do you get onto 7th, that's an issue depending on which intersection you're at and how difficult it is, what the traffic control may be. And certainly we are looking at, we intend to look at alternatives of traffic control at intersections along 7th.
Okay. So, so the keyword there that I want to just nothing has been addressed yet. All we're doing now is trying to understand existing conditions, trying to hear about people's experience. So Cindy, if you could tell us like a little more about that, like, are you asking because you have difficulty making that turn and you'd like to be able to make that turn? I'm making an assumption there, but could you let us know in the chat more about that one? Next one from Lisa, can you please clarify if the Walnut plan is to increase traffic east-west? Well, there's no plan yet. There's an idea for Walnut that was in the transportation master plan of actually identifying bicycle facilities and making the street safer for people who want to walk along it. And so that was identified as a line on the map. So there's no specific plan yet. It's just an idea. And this process is actually going to design that, but we're not going to get into the design until we know about the existing conditions. So that design process will begin after the town board meeting on November 9th. And so what we're doing now is just collecting existing condition information and hearing experiences about that. So Lisa, I presume, if you could let me know in the chat, but I presume, Lisa, you're saying like you would not like to see traffic increase on Walnut east-west. Could you just let us know if we got that one right? Bill, do you want to take the next one from Doug?
Sure. Would it be wiser to put the bikeways on a parallel street to 7th Street?
Oh, let me get the map up. That's an interesting idea. And let me, give me a second, Bill, to get the right visual here. Yeah. So the idea that Doug's saying here is like, hey man, so like, what about 9th? Does 9th go through, Paul? I don't know that street very well. Is 9th a connection through down to Stone Mountain?
No, I don't think it connects.
No. And one way to answer that is none of the parallel streets have as good a north-south connectivity as 7th. So if we could figure out how to make 7th Street a good place to be a bicyclist, it has the advantages of the best connectivity in town to go north-south. Certainly it extends south of the roundabout and goes on north of Main Street on the north end.
Yeah, it's a good point, Doug. Thanks. Like, I think since we've been talking about Walnut, oh, I'm sorry, folks. Let me get back to this. I apologize. We've been talking a lot about Walnut as a parallel to Main Street, and I think 7th Street's definitely not like the size and volume of Main Street yet, but it definitely has more traffic, right? Bill said 15,000, 10,000 vehicles.
12,000, 9 to 12.
So I'm putting it on the list. I think it'd be something that we should obviously consider about like, hey, what about some of these other parallel streets? So Doug, thanks for that comment. Thanks, Doug, for all your comments. Thanks for hanging out and doing this. Is there anything else that we missed that we need to get through in comments?
There's another comment about the difficulty of turning left onto 7th at Stone Mountain and at Chestnut onto 7th. And so we hear you loud and clear, and intersection operations along 7th certainly will be considered as part of the alternative development process.
Cool. That's that Z movement from Stone Mountain, or from Garden up to Stone Mountain, and probably
Garden to Stone Mountain is one of the issues we've been asked to look at, the Z movement that occurs there.
okay. And this says, I see it now, it's in the chat. So turning left on to 7th. Got it. So
Okay.
getting on 7th. So that also came up, I think, at Walnut, right? This notion of how do you get on from the side streets onto 7th. Great. So I'm gonna give everybody just another minute or two here if you wanted to weigh in on anything else. Thank you everybody for hanging around. We're definitely not the best thing on TV tonight. So we appreciate you taking some time to do this. As Paul said, most important thing is to spread the word. We are gonna post probably this video up in the next day or two. So if you wanted to share it, people want to go back, it'll all be there. Okay, I don't see any more coming in. Oh,
There was one more, Carlos, about would a roundabout at the intersection of Walnut and 7th help move traffic better? That's certainly one of the questions we'll be asking ourselves as we move forward.
cool. All right. All right, I'm gonna go once on the questions. I just want to thank everybody for last time. It's really great to work in this community. Everyone is really respectful, and it makes it fun to do this type of work. I'm sure at some point in the journey, maybe we're all going to have some disagreement, and that's healthy, but I really appreciate everybody's openness. So Paul, I'm going to pass it back to you if there's any final closing things you want to wrap up on.
Just to reiterate, thanks everyone for joining us and help spread the word about these projects. And stay tuned as we continue to work, because hopefully we'll have some exciting options to really improve these corridors for everyone.
Great. Okay, so well, I'm going to sign off. Thanks everybody for being there. Have a great weekend.